Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Mark Givler, joined by Chip Minnick, as always. Our our pre-spring questions for all the Big Ten teams series continues here. This episode, we're going to be looking at Nebraska, one of the more interesting teams, programs in the Big Ten in my mind, with all they've got going on right now. Another year for Matt Rule to kind of try and get this program back into contention. I'm a pretty big Matt Rule guy. I think he does have the right stuff to do it, but I know Nebraska fans are hoping that this is a year of major strides in that department. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the spring game. It certainly doesn't look like there's going to be a spring game. He said it's unlikely. It doesn't look like there's going to be a red and white game this year. Is that a big deal? How does that impact their development of their young players in the spring? How does it? We'll get into a minute, like some transfers they have coming in, but like, how big of a deal should we? A lot of people have made a big deal about this. Is it a big deal? Are we making too much of it? Kind of, where do you stand on the spring game thing and how this could impact them?
Okay, well, I will freely admit, I mean, and again, this is coming from an Ohio State fan, so I have a lot of bias when it comes to the spring game, in the sense that I like to go simply because it's an opportunity to be in Ohio Stadium, to see any of the early enrollees, any of the transfer portal guys. I don't put a lot of stock in it, like, oh, this is, this guy is going to definitely start or whatever. I mean, like, that's kind of like the running joke of, like, when it comes to, who is going to be like the superstar from the spring game, is like, okay, because you're cursed because you're not going to probably be seen or heard from again in the regular season. When it comes to Nebraska, I understand where he is coming from with the mindset that, okay, like having a big spring game production, that it's kind of, I don't necessarily agree wholeheartedly with this, but Matt Rule, in his mind, is that, okay, it's like basically like an advertisement to tamper with players on the roster who may flash. And, like after the spring game, the transfer portal is open. So he would try to reduce that. I think overall, and this isn't just Nebraska, I think overall that the spring game concept is going to probably start to fall by the wayside. I mean, Ohio State, let's face it, they are referring to it as a spring showcase. I think it's going to kind of take more of an NFL OTA offseason kind of approach of letting the fans into the stadium, like probably having something kind of like limited, almost like training camp with like, like some plays and some practice time and things like that. And maybe like extended autograph things and like that. I think for Rule to kind of, say like absolutely not is kind of a little over the top. But I also understand the fact that you don't want to have any of your players possibly, being targeted for tampering, since there really are no rules anymore. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see what eventually is definitively decided upon.
Yeah, I agree that the spring game landscape is about to look different. I mean, we've seen it evolve over the years already. I mean, it used to be a legitimate spring scrimmage with full pads and tackling, and it was very competitive, and it's sort of morphed into like a flag football almost.
Right.
The last couple of years for a lot of programs. And so at face value, I don't think it's a huge deal. What I would say, though, for a team like Nebraska, who is still a couple steps away, I think, from where they want to be, you better get some spirited scrimmages in during the spring.
Yes.
You've got a lot to figure out this spring, which we'll get into here in a minute. It can't be a country club. I think for some program, like the programs like Notre Dame and Ohio State and Texas that had deep runs, I think we're going to see limited reps from their stars in the spring. And I think it is going to be more like an off-season OTA type of thing. Nebraska needs to have some competitive practices, some competitive inter-squad scrimmages, even if they're behind closed doors. I mean, that's fine. because they've got some things to figure out. And that's going to bring us right into our next thing, which is 33 transfers from the portal. Like, which is kind of funny because, Matt Rule's like, well, I don't want anyone tampering with my guys. It's like, well, you took 33 guys from the portal. So, like, I guess you would know. I mean, I guess you would know about using the portal and scouting other teams. So, those guys need reps together, do they not?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, that's why I was laughing, thinking when we were kind of talking off air, that, like we both knew Nebraska was active in the transfer portal. I will freely admit on camera, until I saw that number 33, I was thinking this was more along the lines of, okay, like about like 20 new faces, which in my humble opinion is still high. I mean, that's still high. 33 is extremely high, obviously. So when it comes to bringing in these guys, getting them acclimated to the way that you want them to be within your respective program, and developing a sense of chemistry. I don't care if we're talking players on offense or defense. I think, like you said, Mark, I think it's going to be absolutely essential that Nebraska, maybe behind closed doors, outside of the prying eyes of the Nebraska media, that you don't want to see, like who might be making a move on the depth chart. And that's Matt Rule's prerogative. That's fine. But I think having that kind of those kind of intensive practices is going to be absolutely crucial for a program that Matt Rule, he was the one who said that he did not want Nebraska fans to be excited about going to, like the bowl game that they did this past season. He wants to get that program back to where they were 30 years ago. And it's weird to think about it, but it's like, all right, bringing in 33 guys in the off season and trying to get them all to be cohesive and gel is not something that is just easily done. So it's going to be the spring is going to be absolutely crucial for Matt Rule to take for the Nebraska program to take that next step in year 3 of his tenure.
Yeah, no question. They're going to need a lot of practice time, a lot of reps. They're going to have to hit the ground running here in the spring, unlike some other teams that maybe have a little better of an idea of what their roster is going to be this fall. And so it'll be interesting. Again, there's kind of two schools of thought with the spring. Some programs are like, well, let's rest our vets and let's get all these young guys all this time and get them developed. And I think for programs like Nebraska, it's going to be almost like a second fall camp of sorts of like, hey, we gotta get these starters reps. We got to figure out who our starters are. We got to figure out what our combinations look like. So that'll be an interesting thing. But then, of course, like the third thing here, our third question is, and it's probably the most important one, is the development of Dylan Raiola. Like, what does year 2 of Dylan Raiola look like? And again, flashes last year. I'm not sure he was exactly playing better at the end of the year, though, than he was at the beginning of the year. I think he started better than he finished. We talked about Aiden Childs, another young quarterback from Michigan State who seemed to finish better than he started with the turnovers, things like that. Raiola kind of went the opposite direction, but a lot of injuries, a lot of other things there with the Nebraska roster that I think hindered him. You bring in someone like Dane Key from Kentucky, a very experienced, talented receiver. You're, again, all these portal additions. You've rebuilt your offensive line quite a bit. He's really got to take the next step and take care of the football.
Yeah, and we kind of, when it comes to year 2 of a quarterback, you have not only the development and the maturation for the quarterback, but also you have to recognize the fact that other teams that have played Dylan Raiola in 2024, they've seen things that, all right, this is what he does well, this is where he struggles. And within the Nebraska program, making sure that, all right, here are some things that we need to make sure that Raiola is prepared for in year 2. I think the fact that they're bringing in, when we talk about like talented wide receivers like Dane Key to help, we already touched on it as it related to the fact that like the spring, developing that cohesiveness, just because Dane Key is on the roster now doesn't necessarily mean that Dylan Raiola and he are on the same page. So like making sure that they put in the extra reps that are, above and beyond what might take place during the spring. That's going to be so important for Dylan Raiola to, and I don't want to just completely isolate it on Dane Key, but the fact that he puts in the extra time and effort with the wide receivers and running backs and the tight ends, so that he is, just that much better of a player than he was in year one. He did have some moments in year one. He also had some moments where I'm sure that they were looking at in film review and saying, okay, we can't have these kind of freshman mistakes. And that's what he was. He was a true freshman, which was admirable for him to play at a pretty good level. But I mean, he wasn't the best freshman quarterback that I've ever seen play in college football. So he certainly can elevate his game in year two.
Yeah. Again, he started out really, really pretty hot. Hits a lull there in October. He had a 3-game stretch there in the middle of the season against Rutgers, Indiana, and Ohio State, where he didn't throw a single touchdown pass and threw 5 picks.
Yes.
So, rebounded a little bit late. Didn't have a good game against USC in November, but then had a really good game against Wisconsin in a win. Was okay against Iowa and was pretty solid in the bowl game. But some definitely some highs and lows as a true freshman. 67% completion percentage though, and again, they didn't really, they took the training wheels off. 410 pass attempts. They didn't really seem to be limiting, what they were asking him to do. They really kind of threw him into the fire very quickly. So how much of that will pay dividends here, I guess we'll start to see in the spring, but this is a huge year 1 to year 2 is the biggest leap. Anyone will tell you that. All the players will tell you that. Like my second year from my first year is the year I got the bet or improved the most. And that's going to be key here for Dylan, for Nebraska to continue an upward trajectory. They got to a bowl game, win a bowl game. I think now they're going to be looking for a little bit more.
And let's not forget, we've talked about it on previous episodes, but I think what's going to be a big aid to Dylan Raiola, that development, is the fact that Dana Holgorsen is on staff. That's not meant to, I'm not taking shots at the Nebraska coaching staff, but I think that, Dana Holgorsen came in at the, near the tail end of the 2024 season, a complete off season with Dana Holgorsen working with him. I think that might be, with the addition, the transfer portal additions, I think, that can only help in the maturation process.
No doubt. So meshing all the transfers together, Dylan Raiola's development, and again, spring game, yes, no, not a big deal, big deal. Those are the things we're going to be looking at here at Nebraska this spring as the Cornhuskers look to improve on their 7-6 record from a year ago. Again, we'll revisit all these things after the spring and see if there's any new questions that have popped up and do some schedule analysis and things like that. But wanted to go down team by team here and kind of look at 3 big questions going into the spring football. We will be back again here very soon with another one.